those restrictions on that flow of information are out of date. And really, especially because of that environment, because of the internet, because of all the rumors and the social media, more than ever we need newspapers, we need a reliable source of information to present the facts in a fair way. Frank Lamani also closed with just one other anecdote. He had made the comparison of the censored newspapers being like flag football, and pointing out how, every year we have thousands of students who are injured playing tackle football in our high schools. But we're not about to propose legislation banning tackle football and replacing it with flag football. It'd probably be political suicide for those of you up here. But in many ways, even though all the rules are the same except for contact, we know that flag football is not the same game, right? And you would not get 1/10 of the people in the stands watching a flag football game. Your athletes would not have 1/10 the passion playing flag football as they would playing tackle football. And in many ways, this is the same with censored journalism. It is essentially flag football. It is not true journalism. It is, at best, public relations. It is at worst propaganda. If you're operating in that censored environment, and especially in today's age, regardless of what side of the political aisle you're on, I think we can agree that we need good journalism. We need journalists who are inquisitive, fair, balanced, accurate, and you don't get that in an environment of censorship. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions for this witness? Seeing none, thank you for your testimony. And do want to remind everyone that you do need to fill out a witness form before you leave here today, and leave those with us. And also, time limit is 3 minutes on testimony. Thank you for staying in that line. And so with that, we'll start with the young lady here. Unless you would prefer him to go first.
Good afternoon. My name is Mitch Eden, and I'm here wearing a few hats today. I am the Missouri Journalism Education Association president. I'm also the media advisor at the greatest journalism program in the nation, Kirkwood High School. And I'm also a National Journalism Teacher of the Year. So I bring a few perspectives. The main perspective being that it is time. It's time to pass this New Voices Act. Our neighbors, Kansas and Illinois, both have passed bills negating Hazelwood, and we're due. It's been 29 years since Hazelwood, and frankly, it's pretty archaic. This bill clears up a lot of the vagueness of Hazelwood and sets straight the protection for advisors and students in this day and age of 21st century journalism, where critical thinking, collaboration, and instantaneous news takes place. Nothing is more energetic and thriving in a school environment than journalism. Colleges are even calling it a gateway degree. In this day and age where kids sit next to each other yet do not converse but text, journalism teaches them how to communicate. Wouldn't you rather have kids under the New Voices Act practicing journalism under a trained advisor than censoring them and sending them off into the social media landscape, doing underground newspapers without that training? What Hazelwood does, it tells advisors that we don't trust you, and it tells kids we don't value your opinion. Nothing is more deflating than entering a school and working with a journalism program where the kids are self-censoring themselves. They say we could never do that at our school, so they don't try, they don't care. You enter a school, however, like Kirkwood, I see over 180 journalism students a day just by myself in all my classes, and it is the best place in the school. Their ideas are valued, their ideas count. They feel a part of the community. It's civics in action every day. They are engaged. This bill tells them they matter, tells them we trust them, and it tells the advisor the same. I urge you to get this through, just so we're not made fun of by Kansas and Illinois, and that we can tell these kids that their ideas count, their ideas value. Thank you for listening to me today. And I'm going to introduce one of my top editors.
Let's see if we have any questions for you right now.
Sure.
Senator, proceed.
Senator Clark, thank you. I appreciate you being here today, first of all. And last year, there was a challenging situation that the Kirkwood School District had to deal with regarding race. And I believe perhaps one of the actually not a transfer student, a student who is African American who lives within the Kirkwood School District. I have a lot of friends who are parents in that district, and they were alarmed. How did your students cover that story of that young lady who I guess had maybe blackface? There was another student who had blackface or something like that. How did your students cover that?
That incident actually happened in the fall. And the incident, every news event or news item is handled the same way. The kids go out and they find out the facts first. Because a lot of times when you hear via social media, and that's how everybody heard, there's false facts, misinformation. So the editors work with reporters and they know to go and verify information. Once information is verified through multiple sources, they sit down and they weigh the options of coverage. Do we cover it? How do we cover it? If we cover it, will it be detrimental?
So how did you guys cover that particular story?
They did not cover that. They did a simple news brief on the website clarifying facts. They did not pursue it as a feature story or opinions piece after that. They just basically did a 5W&H summary of the events so that any misinformation was clarified. And that's one of the main rules of our student media program, is to dismiss misinformation and put the truth out there.
Yeah, there were a lot of facts that came out of that and misinformation. I had learned a lesson myself in that particular situation. I guess one of the things that I always encourage with my students, and I think one of my interns who is here is also a writer. Yes, he is. And one of the things that I encourage of young people is to always cause people to think further than what they're accustomed to. It's challenging the process, to offer opportunities to other people who were not inclined to think one way, to be a little bit more open to other viewpoints. And so I just wanted to know how that was covered, because a lot of those parents, both white and black, who are in that district, some transfer students, some not, were just really concerned about that. And maybe a month or two afterwards, it looked like things were getting back together again. But I know for the first couple of weeks, it was kind of scary.
And the kids did do a follow-up and they went to the next 2 board meetings just to stay on top of it. But they sensed no need to do a follow-up story because there was no really action taken after that.
Yeah, I just hope that we never get into that practice, which St. Louis does, of suppressing information.
Correct.
Journalists do that, and they have been doing that for a very long time on certain issues in the area. I just hope that we do not encourage our kids to suppress information that's important to the entire society.
And that's kind of the beauty of Kirkwood High School. And I do have a letter from our administrator as well, Dr. Michael Havener, who is the National Journalism Administrator of the Year, is he lets the kids create discomfort. They question the school board, the superintendent, and himself. And he allows that and he supports it just for that open flow of ideas and exchange of information.
Okay, thank you so much.
You're welcome. I do have that letter from Dr. Havener that I can pass out, or how would you like me to
If
distribute?
you want to provide that to us, we can make sure it's distributed amongst the committee, yes.
Okay. And the last thing I was going to say is, while Bob and I are here talking, you really need to listen to these kids. They're amazing. And I
You want to make an introduction?
Yeah, this is one of the...
Mr. Chairman.
Oh, I'm sorry. Senator Andre.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I wanted to follow up on Senator Chappelle-Nadal's questioning about the reporting of the racial tensions in Kirkwood. What if though one of the student journalists wanted to, say, publish the pictures of the white student in blackface, or they wanted to write something that was viewed by the journalism supervisor, teacher, yourself, or by the administration as being racially inflammatory and unproductive to harmonious race relations at the school. What say you? How would you handle that? How would this bill change how you would handle that?
Sure. Well, every program has an editorial policy, first and foremost, that covers everything from advertising to ethics to covering sensitive topics. So if a sensitive topic presents itself, we go through a series of steps. Ours is called questions to ask when the red light goes off. So we would sit there and talk, what is the news?
Okay. Yeah, I don't mean to interrupt you, but in the interest of time, but isn't that red light and those, and considering something to be a sensitive topic or not, isn't that censorship?
No, I don't think so. The kids ultimately.
But what if the kids really want to put that picture of the student in blackface up there and you're telling them, no, that's not productive to a harmonious racial, conversation? Isn't that censorship? Or
If it's not yes or no, if it's not definitive, this is wrong, this is right, then it's ultimately someone's call, whether that's an editorial board or the top editor. You do, as the advisor, you have to go through all the avenues that could happen with publishing. You offer alternatives, maybe not a photo, maybe it is an editorial. So you have thoughtful discussions, and I don't always agree with the student editorial board, but I support their right.
okay. Well, let me just different line of questioning. Everyone on this dais, we've run for public office, we've dealt with the press, the professional press. And, it's a blood sport. Nasty stuff has been written about us. Some of that nasty stuff in the context of our school system might be considered bullying. Where do you draw that line? And I'm asking that question in part rhetorically because what I'm getting at is at some point, someone's censoring, whether it's the student editor or you or someone else, someone's deciding what's appropriate and what's not. And it's maybe not the effect of this bill to just give someone standing to go to court and litigate.
Yeah, and I guess what you're describing is a form of self-censorship. It's kids and advisors going through a thoughtful process to decide, you know what, we would be better off not publishing this. We have a philosophy in our program, person first, journalist second. If you're going to put something out there that's going to hurt someone, be detrimental to someone, and one of the questions we always ask, what would I do if this were about me or my family? So if you call that self-censorship, I call that thoughtful journalism. But yes, there is a process in which you would eliminate some things and not publish. But I think that's being responsible.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions for this witness? Seeing none, now if you would like to introduce.
I had a great car ride up with Julia, Wanning Zimmer, Jack Rentoul, and Patty Judd. I brought 3 students from Kirkwood up here, and I just urge you to listen to students because this bill is really who is protected with the bill. So, yeah.
Good afternoon. I'm Julia Wanning Zimmer, and I'm a senior at Kirkwood High School, and I'm web editor of the Kirkwood Call, our student-run publication. So throughout my 3 years on staff, I've constantly covered controversial issues. I've written about using respectful language, racism, and my own experience with sexual assault. Concurrently, my peers have written about Second Amendment rights, published our highest paid teachers' salaries, and criticized our own administration. Why do we cover these subjects as student journalists? Because true newspapers are a voice for the voiceless, the community outlet for facts, the watchdog. At many schools in our great state of Missouri, however, student journalists are not allowed to be true newspapers because of their administration's practice of prior review and censorship. Somehow, I have been lucky enough to have not gone to a prior review school, but a First Amendment one. At Kirkwood High School, the very administration that we criticize supports us rather than censors us. By being able to place our trust within our administration, not to review our work before we publish it, not only have our news magazine, website, broadcast, and yearbook publications won national awards, but we have been able to experience real-life journalistic situations and cover controversial subjects that tenured journalists win Pulitzer Prizes for. Now, although our newspaper staff does not have principals reviewing our work on the newspaper, we do have student editors. As the heart of any good publication, editors put their staffers before themselves, constantly leading their peers in a positive direction. One of the vital tasks an editor performs is deciding whether or not a piece can be published. At the start of each year, editors like me begin with our motto as journalists: we are people before we are journalists. Meaning, when looking at Stories Come Story Idea Week, we ask our staffers, does this have journalistic value? Will the person be safe if this is published? Would I want this printed about me or my family? If the writer and editors determine that the answer is yes to all of these questions, then and only then do we follow through with the story. In my time on the Kirkwood Call, I've encountered countless student journalists who have scoffed at me when I tell them about the things that we cover. They tell me that writing about things like divorce, teen pregnancy, and drug addiction would have never happened at that school because it's too controversial. When I ask them why they think that and why they don't try, they explain it's because their school's administration practices prior review and censorship, so they don't even bother. Not only does this hinder students from learning how to practice real-world journalism, but it wipes clean their First Amendment rights. Through the passage of the Walter Cronkite New Voices Act, student journalists who are wrongly censored like this will have their rights shielded. Speaking to students like this opens my eyes to how thankful I am for really having the opportunities I've had as a student journalist at Kirkwood High School. With conviction, I strongly believe that my stories have made a difference within my community. As I mentioned earlier, for example, I wrote a story about sexual assault, intending to make others who had experienced similar traumas feel less alone. Although only around 15 students did come up to me to talk about our shared experience, I'm sure countless others were touched by my article as well. Ultimately, student journalism isn't just about the amount of views we get on our stories or how many awards we won. It's about helping others. It's an opportunity for us to find ourselves, to learn not only about what actual journalism is, but to learn about ourselves. A free scholastic press is integral for many high school students in their process of growing up, practically educating themselves and finding who they are. By granting Missouri student journalists their full First Amendment rights, the passage of the New Voices Act would provide kids with the resources to become truly great journalists, empowering them to question the unquestionable, to give a voice to the voiceless, to be the change in the unchangeable. These skills will not only teach students how to be better journalists, but it will teach them how to be better neuroscientists, farmers, lawyers, social workers, senators, humans. I urge for the passage of this bill because all Missouri students deserve to have their lives positively impacted by scholastic journalism as much as mine have. Thank you so much for your time today.
Thank you for your testimony and stating it very well. Thank you.
Thank you.
Do we have any questions for this witness? Senator Shue.
Actually, not a question, just a comment to say, wow, that was beautifully done, and I appreciate it, and I appreciate what you're able to learn at Kirkwood High School. So
Thank you.
look forward to seeing great things from you and other students who have this access.
Any other questions? Seeing none, if those seats could be made available for anyone else wishing to testify. How many more do we have that wants to testify in favor? How many do we have wishing to testify in opposition? Okay, very good. Those four, come on up and have a seat, and we'll proceed. Introduce yourself, sir. The floor is yours.
I am Mark Mawson. I'm with the Missouri Press Association, and we are in support of the Cronkite New Voices Act. We're supportive of an effort to give journalists more freedom, student journalists more freedom that the Hazelwood case shut down. And yet we also feel that there are safeguards in place where the local schools can act as an editor, just like any other editor of a newspaper would. We also feel that this is good for our industry. We need to encourage young journalists to choose this profession because they play a vital role as watchdogs in all of our various communities. Thank you for your consideration.
Thank you for your testimony. Any questions for this witness? Seeing none, thank you very much. And be sure to leave a witness form for us.
Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, Otto Fajan speaking on behalf of Missouri NEA, and we also want to go on record in support of House Bill 441. We want to thank the sponsor for consideration of some suggestions we made. As we looked into this issue last session, we looked at the legislation that had been enacted in some other states where they had made sure that there were provisions to make sure that advisors were kind of not caught in between what they want, which is they want to have this expanded latitude and expression for their students. But in doing so, some of the states had put in provisions which this bill contains to make sure that in doing that, if there's pushback from above, that our folks are protected for doing what the bill calls for and what's right. And so we appreciate the sponsor for putting those provisions in. And so we believe that it strikes that correct balance. We do want to point out a technical matter. They kind of maybe put in belt suspenders and bungee cords in the House committee on the high school provision. It's different from the college provision in that it talks about the civil liability provision, saying beyond what other states have done, where it interfere or alter the communication, but that the civil liability wouldn't, if they fail to act. That may, there's a question to the committee, to the sponsor, that may be limiting the civil immunity in a manner that's not required for folks who are acting in good faith. And so we want the committee to look at that and make sure that that language is the way it ought to be before it becomes law. But we strongly hope that it does become law this session, and we appreciate the sponsor's leadership in bringing it forward in a really excellent form this session. Happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. Any questions for this witness? Senator Shue.
Would you just spell out the section that you're talking about?
It's subsection 7, but this bill has 2 sections. One that applies to, now it's limited to high school students, but within school districts. The other applies to the higher ed institutions. It's subsection 7, and it's always had the sort of provisions that say this isn't, the student expression is not school policy, and that there would be civil immunity for folks who are allowing the student expression that is called for under this act. Some states have just left it at that. Some states have said, except if you interfere or alter the communication, which is kind of what this bill says when it talks about the first part of that exception.
Okay.
But then on the high school section, it also has something about knew or should have known and fails to act, which might actually apply to properly not acting because it's permissible. It just seems like it makes that provision a little less clear. I think it'll still substantially work because that would probably be a very weak case. But we just thought that the Model Act and what other states have done seems to be working and is enough and perhaps more clear on the point. So anyway, we would encourage the committee to look at that carefully and make sure we've got the right fit.
Thank you. Senator Everett.
Thanks, Mr. Chairman. Thanks, Otto. This is probably not necessarily an area of expertise as much as it is, I guess, relying on your sense of kind of direction things are going. Some years ago, one of my sons was interviewing for the Air Force Academy, and the young lady that Senator Talent had sent to coordinate the interviews had been a journalism student. Now, she was in college. She had been at MU, and she transferred out of MU, and I asked her why she transferred. And she said, well, because the journalism school there was just so ultra-liberal that she just couldn't take it anymore. And I asked her for some illustration. She said, well, for example, what really broke the camel's back was that she was kind of the token conservative in one of her journalism classes, and the professor would always give her kind of the ringer issue whenever they had assignments. And she said the last one he gave her was to write a story, but he had some kind of an institution and a person, and you're supposed to write a story, putting these two together. And he gave her Dick Cheney and Halbert. So she said she worked harder than she'd ever worked on a paper in her life, did all of her research, documented everything, footnoted everything, turned in the paper, came back with an F. She said that she rewrote it as a parody, turned it back in, and he gave her an A. And she transferred out to another school in St. Louis to finish her journalism. I guess the question I have is, are we seeing the same kind of, I guess, prejudiced journalism in high school as we see at the university level, in your opinion? Are we seeing those same kind of pressures?
When I hear from my members who are the advisors, the pressures I hear about are in the direction that this bill pushes against. So I'm not hearing that.
So you're not observing that, at least at the high school level, the same degree that we see it in college?
No. When I hear from my members who are the advisors, they're like, I mean, doing this has been on our platform, and doing it in the right way with both pieces has been on our platform for many years. Probably, I mean, the national movement's called Cure Hazelwood. So, I mean, it's been known, it's been an issue for media advisors since the decision. And so that's almost 30 years now.
Well, thank you for being willing to step out of your comfort zone. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Any other questions? Seeing none, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Anyone else